Yeah.
It's not so little.
Oh.
It's a big set. I'm not sure. It could probably be ordered from the Kollel bookshop or Chabad books. It will probably take a few months to arrive. You can also buy individual volumes, but if you're doing a chapter a day, I mean, it means that you'll be getting a new volume approximately every 2-3 months. But they're not. I don't know if they're all available in Johannesburg or in South Africa, I should say. So I don't really have a simple solution for that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm sure you can order the set. It's actually a really nice set to have, so I would recommend that. Okay, here we go. So as we usually do on a Thursday, just seeing where we're up to in the Rambam in general, we are in the laws of Shofar, Sukka, and Lulav. The Rambam puts these three mitzvahs together, going from Rosh Hashanah to Sukkot, chapter 2. Today we'll be learning all about the Shofar. We are in the third of the 14 volumes of the Rambam. We've done pretty well. We've done about we've done about a fifth of the Rambam, which is very, very significant because the Rambam is huge. It covers every section of Jewish law. And within the book of Zmanim, so there are about 10 subjects, and we've also made our way mostly through the book of Zmanim, of times. We learned all about Shabbos, about Erev, about Yom Kippur, about Yom Tov. We learned all about Pesach. And now we're learning all about Shofar, Sukkah, and Lulav. And coming up ahead of us, next will be the laws of Shkalim, which would be a contribution that was made in temple times, which was time-based. And then after that comes Kiddush HaChodesh, which has a lot of astronomy, quite fascinating and quite complex. So actually, most of the chapters of Kiddush HaChodesh are fairly simple, but there's around a week. So I think Kiddush HaChodesh has around 20 chapters. And of those 20 chapters, about maybe 10 of those chapters, I guess it's quite a bit, have advanced astronomy. So get ready for that. That's coming our way. And then we'll learn about fasts, Megillah, and Hanukkah, and that will bring us to the end of the book of Zmanim, at which point we'll move on to the next book, which deal with all mitzvahs relating to women. So that's just a little bird's eye view of all of the laws of the Torah as they appear in the Rambam. And now let's take a look at chapter 2. As you see, it is a fairly simple and short chapter. Here we go. So for starters, who is required? Everyone, says the Rambam, is obligated to hear the sounding of the shofar. Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, converts, freed slaves. So in temple times when people were able to buy a slave, obviously the slave would have to be treated with a high level of not just respect, actually. The slave would need to be cared for. Is your hand up over there, David? You're on mute.
I don't see the text, Rabbi.
Oh, do the others see the text? Jeff, you're on mute.
It's half covered, Rabbi.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. Is that better? Can you see it now?
I've just moved pictures. For me, it's okay. I don't know if David's done.
Just see the shofar screen, and on the right we can see the writing here.
So you can see it all?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes.
David?
No, not yet.
Maybe what you can do is you can take your mouse and click on the people, on the box around the people, and drag it out of your way.
That's what I
I'm on my phone.
Oh, so then try swipe to the left or to the right. Does that help?
Yeah. Okay, I've got that. The heading shofar.
Yes. So you could just.
Oh yes, yeah. I've got it.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Pleasure. So who is required to hear shofar? Everyone is required, whether you're a Kohen, a Levi, a Yisrael, a Ger, a convert, freed slaves. Talking about slaves, the way they appear in the Torah, not only are they treated with respect, but they actually would need to be treated very well. The person would need to give them the same bedding as one had for oneself, the same food, etc., etc. Now, if a person was to acquire a slave, if that slave was redeemed, then that slave would become like a Jew, like a convert. In fact, the Gemara speaks about a scenario where they only had 9 people for the minyan, and they were so desperate to get their 10th man that one of the members present said, hang on a minute, and he freed his slave on the spot so that his slave can become a full-fledged Jew and participate in the minyan. So that's a powerful lesson about the importance of a minyan. All of these people are required to hear the shofar. However, a woman and somebody who still is a slave, as well as a child, are not required. So why woman? Because we've learned the principle that any mitzvah that is, not any mitzvah, most mitzvahs that are, or the rule is that any mitzvah that has a designated time, women are not obligated to do. Because women have other responsibilities, and so they are not obligated in time-based mitzvahs, except for where there are exceptions. So there are times where we make exceptions, but the general rule is that women are not required to do any mitzvah that has a specific time, which is the case with the shofar. Slaves are not their own boss, and therefore they're not required yet in mitzvahs until they're freed. And children are not yet required in mitzvahs until they become barabas mitzvah. Here's an interesting one where a person is a half slave and half free. So he sold half of himself, or he freed half of himself. So, or a tumtum. A tumtum is a person who is, their body is the area that differentiates between male and female is covered by skin. And they actually are unsure whether they are a male or a female. And an androgynous is a person that actually, I think it's today in the dictionary, I think it's a Greek word, is a person that actually has both male and female organs. So these 3 people are required to hear shofar because they all have a side to them that is required, that half of that slave is free, and therefore that half is required at the mitzvah. And that tumtum might be a man, and if he is a man, then he would be required at the mitzvah. And an androgynous, a part of him is a man, and therefore, once again, he is required in the mitzvah. So that is who is required. What about blowing for somebody else? So we have a general principle that whoever is not himself obligated in the mitzvah cannot do it for somebody else. So meaning that if you're not required to do the mitzvah and somebody else is, then the mitzvah doesn't apply to you as much as it does to him. And since it doesn't apply to you as much as him, so therefore you can't do it for him. Let's give a little bit of explanation over here. Someone asking a question?
Oh, that's all as well.
No. Okay, I'm just going to...
Sweet.
Okay. So here's an interesting concept, and that is that how is it that one person can do a mitzvah for somebody else? Because, I mean, a mitzvah is something that is an obligation of the individual. So you have a concept called Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, which means that everybody, all Jews, are considered guarantors for each other. And since they're all considered guarantors for each other, therefore, any mitzvah that somebody else needs to be done is as if we haven't done it, because that's the nature of a guarantor. If I say that if that person doesn't pay up the money, that I need to pay it up, that means as long as he didn't pay it, his debt is on me to some extent. And since all Jews are guarantors for each other, as long as somebody else has not done the mitzvah, it's as if I haven't done it yet either. And so therefore I can do it on his behalf. That's the general principle. But that only applies if I'm in the same type of space as the other person. Meaning, if I'm not obligated in the mitzvah, then what that means is that this mitzvah doesn't apply to me. If it doesn't apply to me, then I wouldn't be able to do it for somebody else that it does apply to. Or if it doesn't apply to me on the same level. So with regards to shofar, somebody who is not obligated to do the mitzvah cannot do the mitzvah for somebody who is obligated to do the mitzvah. So practically speaking, that means that a woman who is not required to hear shofar, it's still a mitzvah for her, but she's not required, she wouldn't be allowed to blow shofar for a man. Or a child who's not required wouldn't be able to blow shofar for an adult. And the person who listened to that blowing would not fulfill the mitzvah. Here's an interesting one. An androgynous, we said is somebody who's both male and female. He has physical signs of both. So he can do the mitzvah for another androgynous, because they both have the same level of requirement. They're both 50% required. But he wouldn't be able to do it for anybody else, not a man and not a woman, because it's like a type of his own. There's actually a lot of debate how we view an androgynous. Do we view it as a person that is a man and a woman, or is it a different type of sex, like it's its own category? So the Rambam says you can go for somebody of his own kind, but not of a different kind. A tumtum, which we said is somebody who is not male and female, he's either, or this person is either male or female, and we just don't know which one because the areas have been covered by skin. So a tumtum would not be able to blow for anyone, because we don't know who he is, if he's a male or female. If the skin was, if he went through an operation, it would be possible that he was either male or female. My question over here is, why wouldn't you be able to blow for a woman? Because a man can blow for a woman, and a woman can blow for a woman. So I'm not sure why the Rambam says that he can't blow for anybody. I think it means that he can't blow for somebody that's required in the mitzvah, which would be a man. A woman can do the mitzvah, but she's not obligated in the mitzvah. Okay, and what about a slave that's half free? So he wouldn't even be able to blow for himself, because when you blow, you're blowing with your whole being. And it means that part of himself is not obligated, which means that he'll be, the part of him that is obligated will be hearing shofar from the part of him that's not. So he would have to have somebody else blowing for him.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what exactly is a slave who's half free?
And it means that, let's see. We had it a little earlier, but it means literally that, I think it means like one day he is a slave, and certain days of the week he is, and certain of the days of the week he's not. So basically, he was sold as a slave, and then a part of him was freed. So maybe he was sold to two people, and one of the two partners freed him. And since one of the two partners freed him, therefore half of himself became free. So he's half. Let's see if he explains it a little bit over here. I'm sorry, I didn't look it up again, but it's something along those lines. Okay, it looks like he doesn't discuss it over here. So that's either somebody who was sold by two partners and one of the two partners freed him, or it's somebody who was half of his costs, however he was sold and however much a slave would be sold, was paid and the other half wasn't. I don't remember exactly offhand. Okay.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about intention, and that's an important one. So a person who happens to just be busy blowing the shofar, but he's doing it just to practice, to learn. And then it turns out that he did a great job. He blew perfectly. So he would not fulfill his obligation, because when blowing shofar, one needs to have the intention that the reason I'm blowing is in order to do the mitzvah. So neither would the person blowing fulfill the mitzvah because he didn't have the right intention. And once the person blowing doesn't have the right intention, the person that's listening, even if he does have the right intention, he also would not fulfill his obligation because the person that was blowing for him didn't do it right. So basically, you need intention both on the part of the blower and on the part of the listener. So if the person listening had the intention of doing the mitzvah, the reason he's listening is in order to fulfill the mitzvah of shofar, and the person blowing didn't have in mind that particular person, or he had in mind to blow for somebody else, then again it wouldn't work. So the person blowing, maybe you had in mind that I'm only blowing for myself, that I'm not blowing for anybody else. So he didn't have the other person in mind, and the other person, so then that doesn't work either. But if the person blowing has in mind that whoever wants can listen, meaning that I'm having in mind everybody, not by name, but just in general, that I'm blowing for everybody, then anybody who has in mind to join in can join in. So if, for example, you were walking past the shul, and as you're walking past, you hear them starting to blow shofar, and you're like, great, let me fulfill the mitzvah right now, then you would be able to fulfill the mitzvah as long as you, I guess it wouldn't help if as you walk past, they were already blowing, because then you've missed part of it. But if you saw that they were about to start blowing shofar, even though the rabbi, whoever it is that's blowing, doesn't have you in mind, he just, he's blowing for the shul. Really, when a person blows for a shul, he's blowing for everybody, anybody that might be listening, and therefore you would be able to fulfill your mitzvah when you did that. Number 5, more on that. If the person blew the shofar with the intention of enabling all those hearing his blowing to perform the mitzvah, and a listener heard while having intention to do the mitzvah, even though the person blowing did not have a specific intention, that's we just did it outside, he fulfills his mitzvah. Accordingly, if a person was traveling, so we just did that all outside, or he was sitting in his house and he lives next door to the shul, and he heard the tkiyas from beginning to end, then he fulfills the mitzvah, since the leader had everybody in mind. Okay, number 6, and from here till number 10, we enter into a very interesting topic, and that is, can the shofar be blown on Shabbos? And you probably, some of you that are maybe a little bit more familiar with the laws would say absolutely not. How can you blow the shofar on Shabbos? But really, it's a fascinating discussion in the Gemara, and if you think about it a little bit more, then you should ask yourself, why shouldn't I be able to blow the shofar on Shabbos? So actually, blowing the shofar is not one of the 39 malachos, one of the forbidden neighbors that one cannot do on Shabbos or Yom Tov. It's not listed there. If you remember when we learned all about Shabbos, the only reason a person is not allowed to play an instrument is because they might fix it. So there's actually nothing wrong. There would be nothing wrong with music, with playing instruments on Shabbos, if not for the rabbi's prohibition. The rabbis have the power to prohibit, and the rabbi said that if you play, then you might come to fix it, and therefore one is not allowed to play sounds on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So that if the whole prohibition is all rabbinic, then and then think about this. I guess with the shofar also you could argue maybe there is nothing to fix. Okay.
So
And it's
Rabbi,
a mitzvah. Yes.
isn't the thing about carrying it, maybe you'll carry it on Shabbos?
Yes, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But before I make that point, I mean, it's a mitzvah. It's not just a mitzvah. I mean, firstly, it's a mitzvah. It's a biblical requirement. And generally, the rabbis are not going to prevent us from doing a mitzvah, meaning the rabbis will say, I don't know, imagine if the rabbi said that you shouldn't do something that's a mitzvah because you might come to break Shabbos. It's a mitzvah. And it's not just a mitzvah, it is the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. The most important thing to do on the entire Rosh Hashanah is to blow the shofar. In fact, it's not just the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah, it's the mitzvah of the whole year. There's something powerful coming to hear shofar Rosh Hashanah. Chassidus explains that when we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, we bring a new energy into the whole, we bring a new spiritual life force into the whole world, the whole year ahead for the whole world. So blowing shofar is major, it's massive. So it's quite perplexing that the rabbi said that this should be avoided. Now there is a reason, as you mentioned. The rabbi said that, as we'll see in a moment in the Rambam, that somebody might not know how to blow the shofar. And so he might take his shofar with him down the block to the local rabbi to ask him to help him in how to blow the shofar. And through that, he'll be breaking Shabbos, because a person is not allowed to carry on Shabbos if there isn't an Erev. But this is also difficult to understand. Chassidus asks the question. Here you have, if the person blows, then they're doing a huge mitzvah, as we've just described. Okay? If you're going to say that nobody can blow, or let's put it this way, if he blows, he's doing a huge mitzvah, and he's not necessarily doing anything wrong. It's only a possibility that there might be somebody that won't know how to blow and will want to get advice and will forget that he's not allowed to carry on Shabbos. So for that individual, that will suddenly, he'll know it's Shabbos, but he'll forget that he's not allowed to carry on Shabbos. We're saying that no Jew in the whole world can hear Shofar on Shabbos, which is just really disturbing, actually. Why would the rabbis have the power to do that? But why would they want to do that? Why would the rabbis want to take away a mitzvah like Shofar from the whole Jewish people? We'll see exceptions, except for Jerusalem and a Beis Din in temple times. But why would the rabbis want to remove the mitzvah of Shofar from the vast majority of the Jewish people, just so one guy that is not paying attention, that's looking for help and forgets that he's not allowed to carry on Shabbos, just so that he doesn't violate the law? It sounds really disturbing. So Chassidus explains actually that whatever is achieved through the blowing of the shofar, that added special energy, that power, that experience that happens when we blow the shofar, Hashem does that for us when Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos. So although we're missing out on physically hearing the shofar, the spiritual impact of the shofar still happens. So we're not actually spiritually missing out. And otherwise, the rabbis would never take it away from us. Rather, the rabbis understood that whatever shofar would achieve is being achieved by itself when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. So that was just a little bit of a discussion, an interesting discussion as far as blowing shofar on Shabbos from a Hasidic perspective. And now let's see how it is addressed by the Rambam. So if Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, then in most places or in all places the shofar is not sounded. This is something that was instituted as a shvus, meaning it was a fence put up by the sages. Now we should blow the shofar because it's a mitzvah, it's a positive command, and that should override a rabbinic prohibition. But why not? So the rabbi said a person might take the shofar in his hands and carry it to a colleague. Meaning, sorry, let me just clarify. If we were just worried about instruments, that wouldn't be an issue because it's only the rabbis that prohibited instruments and they wouldn't make a prohibition that overrides a mitzvah. But here there's another concern. There's a concern. The rabbis made a decree that a person might take it in his hands, carry it to a friend so that the other person can blow it for him. And through that, he'll be carrying 4 cubits in the public domain on Shabbos. Obviously, this is where there's a public domain and there wouldn't be an Erev. And through that, he'd be violating Shabbos, and be doing a sin that, if a person did intentionally, would be punishable by stoning. So since in order to prevent a person from sinning on Shabbos, because he'd want to hear the shofar, therefore the rabbi said nobody should blow shofar on Shabbos. I mean, this tells us about the importance of being careful not to violate the Shabbos, even if it's for a mitzvah. It's very often a question that people ask, Rabbi, is it okay to drive to shul? A typical question, because I'm going to daven, I'm going to do something wonderful, but it's Shabbos. I know you're not allowed to drive on Shabbos. So we see over here that certainly, even if the one is looking to do a mitzvah, that wouldn't override doing a sin. And because of that, the rabbi said that no Jew in the entire world should have the mitzvah of Shofar on Shabbos in case one Jew might accidentally break Shabbos in the process. Now, as far as children are concerned, so if they're still not yet bar mitzvah and they end up playing around with the shofar on Shabbos, since it's so the adults are not obligated to stop them. An adult is permitted to be involved in instructing children in how to blow on Yom Tov. Again, even though they're not obligated, since it is Rosh Hashanah, you would be able to assist the child in figuring out how to blow, as opposed to if it wasn't Rosh Hashanah, regular Shabbos, you don't have to stop him, but you certainly wouldn't be able to help him. And this is whether they've reached the age of education, which some say is 6 or 7, or they haven't yet reached that age. Okay. As we've said, the only prohibition in blowing is rabbinic, and therefore one can be more lenient when it's Rosh Hashanah, even though the child is not obligated. One would be allowed to help the child blow. More on that. So when the sages decreed not to blow the shofar on Shabbos, this only applied in a place that there wasn't a Beis Din. However, when the Beis Hamikdash, when the temple was still standing, and we had the Beis Din Agad, the Sanhedrin, the big high supreme court in Jerusalem, so then everybody in Jerusalem would blow the shofar on Shabbos. Why? Because people there would be careful, they would be sensitive to the law and make sure that it didn't bring them to break Shabbos. So, in fact, it wasn't only for people in Jerusalem, but anybody who was in a city within the outer limits of Jerusalem, meaning that they could see Jerusalem, meaning they're not too low, they're not too far down that they can't see, and they could hear the shofar being blown in Jerusalem, as opposed to people that were too high up, and able to travel, meaning that the roads weren't choppy. So any place that is in the vicinity of Jerusalem would be allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbos in temple times. Anybody beyond that would not be allowed to blow shofar on Shabbos. So this is a similar concept you have nowadays as far as on Purim. We're going to learn soon about Purim. We know that in Jerusalem, they celebrate Purim a day later. They celebrate Purim on the 15th. So again, what's considered part of the city? You have some cities that are really on the outskirts, and you might want to ask yourself, is that part of Jerusalem or not? So the principle is that if they meet these three things, meaning they can see it, and they can hear it, and they can travel to it, then they would be able to be considered like Jerusalem. I think when it comes to Megillah, it's just as far as long as they can see it. I'm not sure if it also means that they would be able to hear. But with regards to shofar, if the person is in a place where they would be able to hear a shofar being blown from Jerusalem, then they're considered like part of that, and in temple times would be allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbos. A few more points on that. Now that the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed, wherever a court whose judges received smicha in Israel permanently hold sessions, in other words, wherever there's a basin that had received their smicha in Israel, so the shofar is sounded on Shabbos. Furthermore, the shofar is sounded on the Shabbos only in a court that has the power to sanctify the new moon, to declare when it's Rosh Chodesh. 8 minutes, however, the shofar will not be sounded in Beis Dins, meaning even if they received smicha, if they no longer have the authority to declare Rosh Chodesh, then they wouldn't have the authority to allow people to blow shofar on Shabbos either. So there are a lot of conditions that are met. So practically speaking, nowadays, the shofar is not blown anywhere on Shabbos. As it may be sounded during the entire time they are in session, even after they have begun preparing to rise, as long as they have not risen. The shofar may be sounded before the meeting, as long as they're in the court. However, outside of the court, the shofar may not be sounded. This is nowadays. Why is the shofar allowed to be sounded in the court? Because the court is scrupulous in the observance of the mitzvahs, and in its presence, those who blow the shofar will not carry, because they'll make sure not to sin. The court will warn them. Finally, number 10, in the present age, when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah for 2 days, the shofar is sounded only on the second day. The shofar is also blown on the second day, just as it is on the first. If the first day falls on Shabbos, then those who are unable to be in the presence of a Beis Din and hear shofar on the first day on Shabbos would hear it on Sunday. So practically speaking, nowadays that we have a 2-day Rosh Hashanah, we never have a Rosh Hashanah that we don't hear the shofar at all, because if one day is Shabbos, then we'll still be able to hear it the next day. Thanks so much for joining, and wishing you